Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all around the world of crypto and blockchain technology. And today I have another amazing guest. He is the CEO of Shielded Technologies. His name is Eran Barak. Eran, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Fantastic. So happy to be here.
Thank you for joining me. I look forward to it. So let's kick things off, and I'll ask you first. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Started my career as in software development. Got curious about, why we build what we build. So went to product, then kind of wanted to kind of create the story. So went over to marketing, and I wanted to be the one telling the story. So went to sales, kind of got the journey in and out, both small companies, large companies, startups, et cetera, et cetera. One probably notable company that pertains to your question created a company called Symphony in financial services back in 2014 that had kind of big success and became very prevalent across the financial industry, became kind of the ways banks interact. And we had all of Wall Street, Goldman and BlackRock and JP and who would you think on the platform. And the interesting thing about there was that the banks, once you embed something into their technology, became very nervous about what would happen if the company, the vendor, were to kind of take control over things, or what would happen if they went bust, right? So they wanted to make sure that everything was fully redundant with servers, but they also asked about, what would be a hostile takeover of the company? Could a competitor come in? And that kind of started my journey into thinking about there has to be a better way than a single vendor, and that decentralization really should be the answer to how industries kind of work, because it's not just the banks, it's not just that company that could be a threat for a hostile takeover or censorship or other things. And when I kind of finished my journey with Symphony, I knew that my next adventure is going to be in the space of decentralization and blockchain, and that's how I got here.
Got it. Got it. Sounds logical to me. So uh, it sounds impressive too. So that's pretty good. Yeah, I heard Symphony. I was at AIG, so I definitely know where you guys are. Very cool. So now you have Shielded Technologies. I want to find out what Shielded Technologies is all about, including your vision, your mission, what you aim to solve.
Sure. So Shielded is the engineering company or the labs behind a blockchain called the Midnight Network. The story of Midnight started back in 2019. Charles Hoskinson, who's known as one of the Ethereum co-founders and later created Cardano, asked a very simple question: can a blockchain keep a secret? Uh, Turns out it's way more complicated than one would think, and it has a lot of kind of competing parts and kind of technologies and concepts related to it. But Shielded today really champions kind of that vision. And for me, really is, can we create a world where digital sovereignty is a right, and we can kind of use proofs instead of trust. So if you think about it, most of our life today, we are using intermediaries, right? Whether it's Google or whether it's a provider or a healthcare or a government or whatever it is. And those have other interests in mind, and they're fallible to a degree, right? As intermediaries. We want to create technologies that shift the foundation of trust from those intermediaries to a technology or something that is unfallible, like a mathematical certainty, and allow individuals and organizations to, if you will, to govern and own their own identity, their own data, their own rights. So the right to speak, we see a lot of that in some more countries like Russia and China, where people don't necessarily have the rights to say what they want, to trade as they want. to govern kind of their own life and connect with others. If we can introduce to the world technologies that empower people, I think that's the legacy that we want to create.
So that's a good question. Can a blockchain keep a secret?
Well, it
Um,
it turns out, as I said, it's a harder question to solve. So I need to break that down into two parts because when people think about keeping a secret, they're thinking about their data. And there are a lot of technologies out there, great ones, encryption, zero knowledge, FHE and others, MPC, that all focus about how do you protect data. And there is no one champion or one kind of a tool or one style that would win. Every tool needs a different, or every challenge needs a different job. I'll give you the analogy of, when a handyman comes to your house, they don't come with just one tool in hand. They got a toolbox with a whole bunch of tools, each for a different kind of use case. And I think we're going to use different types of data protection technologies for different use cases and different needs. Where we see still a gap in the market today is handling the other part, which is the metadata. That's where very little attention has been given, and perhaps for a reason that we all understand, which is regulation and compliance. Anybody that tried to protect and encrypt metadata, and we know of examples like Zcash and Monero, got in hot waters with the regulators over this. And people, maybe perhaps your audience needs to understand. Usually, when you think about compliance, you don't think about it at the level of a blockchain because compliance is something that the rules govern what you're doing. So, let's say you're doing a financial application that has some regulatory aspects. If you're choosing, I don't know, a birthday cake, that probably is not a regulated activity. If you're a accredited investor, you have a different set of rules than if you're a mom and pop or just a regular kind of Joe, right? If you're doing it in the US, in Connecticut, or if you're doing this in Zimbabwe, different rules will apply. So usually regulation doesn't get involved in the database or blockchain or any of the infrastructure technology. It only really gets evolved or applied at the application layer, which is why blockchains as a whole never really thought much about compliance or regulatory other than we will enable dApps being built on us to be regulatory compliant. However, with Monero and Zcash trying to do an encrypted token to protect metadata, the regulators suddenly realize there's a different game involved because I could buy $100 worth of Monero and give it to Jamil here, and we've just established money laundering kind of channel because everything is encrypted. So suddenly the regulator said, like, wait a second, I need to get involved at the blockchain level on regulatory and compliance, and we need to talk about this, which is why things kind of got it really stumped there. We were faced with that challenge. It's like a damn if you do, damn if you don't. Because if we don't encrypt the metadata, then you expose things you don't intend to. And I know you are. I saw some of your recent podcasts about AI and how much AI kind of dives into things, right? And you can make connections with AI that you never have thought, would happen. Give you an example. Let's say I'm actually off to see the doctor this afternoon. Regular checkup, nothing exciting, folks. But if somebody were tracking my doctor visits and they could see which doctor am I going to see, how frequent I go to see that doctor, they could then correlate that using AI with other people who went to the same doctor and what they know about them and discern what is my medical situation even without actually seeing or being there for the doctor visit. We could find so much intelligence using metadata. It's a gold mine, especially in financial services, healthcare, and many other stuff. And today, I can find out things about people. They don't even realize how much we can learn about them. So protecting the metadata is so pivotal. And we had to find a way to kind of have the cake and eat it too, kind of make protect the metadata, but not get kind of jammed up by the regulator with encrypted tokens. Midnight, the technology that we've built, has successfully made that happen. I can give you some more details, but we filed with the regulator showing them how we solved this, and we got it kind of accepted by Mika and others saying like, yeah, this works. This meets regulatory requirements while kind of protecting the interest of the users.
I think I agree with you on the application level because when I entered the crypto space in 2017, like I didn't know much about like AIG did a pretty good job shielding its employees against going out and buying being early Bitcoin holders. I heard about Bitcoin. I saw Bitcoin. I said, that's to me, that's a database. So on a blockchain level, it's a database. But then I got involved, and then all the application was like, okay, it's a war against banks. It's a freedom. It's all this stuff, and I'm like, oh boy, you know,
It,
um,
it is a database, but it exposes everything. Somebody made a joke that Bitcoin is like Twitter for your bank account because everything is visible. My son took a job at a coffee shop. And I thought about it, you know what? I'm gonna go visit him and get some coffee. Now, if I were to do that with, let's say, a Bitcoin wallet, and I would tap kind of my phone on the device there, now the coffee shop knows my wallet address. They could look back all my transactions history, and looking into the future, they will forever know all my transactions into the future. I don't think that's what we intend or what we think about when we transact with Bitcoin and or other kind of blockchains. We don't realize how much we're sharing and what kind of exposure we're creating.
yeah, I, I I agree. I agree. And you said narrative. You said I had a bunch of podcasts last season that were AI. I'd say half of them were AI. You know, like I had 130 some, so like a lot, right? But now there's another narrative going on, and it's a privacy narrative. And this past week, Zcash's price shot up, and Monera's price shot up, and I expect Litecoin to shoot up, and I expect RLC to shoot up too. But as far as the narratives, privacy seems to be a hot narrative right now. So why is that? And is it really going to be able to create, digital sovereignty as a right?
So we need to think um, about what we share and who we share it with. Kind of once the data is out there, you have very little ability to control. Uh, I gave the example of a doctor, right? My medical record is not here at home with me. It's at the doctor's office, probably filed in some drawer, and I don't really have any knowledge who has access to that, how they're using it, and I just need to think that the doctor, although they specialized in medicine and not data protection, is taking good care of my records. It would be nicer if I had kind of my own records and the right to decide who gets access to it, because privacy needs to be in context. I'll explain. You're okay sharing your medical record. I'm just using that as an example with your doctor, but probably not with your gardener, right? You don't want it to be completely public. And when you say with your doctor, you mean a doctor. You don't mean that, you're giving it to doctors worldwide, whatever they want to do that. And you're giving it probably only in the context of your visit. You don't mean that that access is forever given, and if that doctor decides to retire, they still have access to your medical records, etc., etc. So you really want to have a judgment and a choice about your information, who is it shared with, how is it used, and you want to be able to revoke that right or change your mind because things change, both in your life and in other cases in the other counterparty right. You mentioned zero knowledge. The reason I like zero knowledge as a technology compared to some other ways of protecting data is that the information is not truly shared. It's only an attestation about the information that is shared. And so the person on the other side gets the utility, but doesn't get the actual data. Therefore, you still have control over the information. So, for example, let's say I want to go to vote. We have an upcoming election in a kind of next month. I can prove that I'm eligible to vote in a certain jurisdiction without actually showing all my details. The person at the poll doesn't need to know my exact birthday or my address or if I need to wear glasses to drive or anything else about me. They just need to validate that I'm able to vote at that location on that event. Similarly, access to other kind of systems, similarly, kind of to make payments or take a loan. If I want to take a loan, I want to showcase to the bank or whoever providing me the funds that I have the collateral to back what I'm saying, kind of is the money that is there. But I don't necessarily need to show them all my assets and all my doing and all my business. This is examples for an individual, but similarly, as you're asking about privacy, it's the same for businesses. Businesses are struggling with the thought of putting all their data on chain. They see the value of decentralization, but they're like, I can't put all my stuff out there and have all my competition kind of see exactly what's happening in my business, and they'll be able to outmaneuver me if I do that. So whether it's for regulatory reasons or business competitive reasons or privacy of an individual reason, we want to have discretion. We want to have what we refer to as rational privacy, where you have a say into what information is shared, how it's shared, with who it's shared, to what degree you can revoke it, that kind of stuff. I think is a valuable kind of asset in your tool chest.
Did I say Zeke? I think I might. If I mentioned ZK, I'm thinking about it. Um, and you said institutions, right? So institutions, they have big, huge, different like compliance departments. They don't have privacy departments. They have compliance departments, and I know there's an ongoing privacy versus compliance debate. So I want to find out how ZK is reshaping that, because some people
I
say
don't
that
think,
ZK
yeah.
is ZK is dead. I don't know. I
No,
think
no, no, no. ZK is not dead for the same reason as I said. Handyman comes in, different tools for different jobs. ZK would be fantastic for certain things and probably not the right tool for others. But I want to challenge what you were just kind of saying about the competition between privacy and compliance, because I think that's a misdemeanor that people don't appreciate. We have laws that require privacy. GDPR is one example. HIPAA is another example. We are required by law to protect certain types of data for certain type of situations. How can a business be regulatory compliant, let's say with GDPR, if it's using a technology like blockchain that can never forget? It can't. It can't. So the way to work with a blockchain that never forgets, right, is to use zero knowledge, because then you don't put the actual data on chain. You just put an attestation about data. You don't expose the PII that GDPR is kind of afraid of kind of sharing. Therefore, you're able to have blockchain with zero knowledge is compatible with GDPR, protecting individuals' privacy while kind of delivering the utility that you're looking for.
so. It's not one or the other. It's both in combination
It's
with one
both
another.
in combination make it possible, because let's face it, we as individuals make trade-offs about our privacy every day. I use Google and I know that Google is data mining my usage, right? But that's the trade-off that I'm willing to do in order to get free search. I do that every day, and probably many other people as well. We do that for various things. But in some cases, I have to trust that the law and the providers are doing the right thing in protecting my assets or the information I give them. And regulatory frameworks like GDPR, HIPAA, and others are providing the kind of the guidelines for businesses to operate in the right way to protect my interests. Otherwise, this is going to be a complete chaos.
Well, yeah, everything leads toward entropy anyway. But um, I want to find out. You mentioned AI, like you mentioned data mining. User control. So what do you see right now? Right now, people are saying the next innovation is Zcash, which is not. It's the next innovation. It's an ancient innovation. What do you see as the next wave of privacy innovation? And what does it mean for like data mining and AI stuff and user control?
Okay, so we have a combined set of questions. I'll say this. I think AI is a massive force to be reckoned with and to incorporate into our life. Hopefully, it'll kind of advance humanity in the right way. It is gobbling up every piece of information that we have. Everything around here, most research around AI already claims that AI has consumed all the public information out there. Guess what they're coming after next? It's our private data. Why? Because they want to personalize the experience and their responses from AI. They want to make them as individually applicable to us. How can we give AI access to some of our private information without actually having that information leak into the public? Well, there are a couple of ways. One is we can run a local AI, right, where we don't, it's not a kind of run on a public infrastructure, but that really limits us to only using the resources at our individual disposal, right? Either on our phone or on our computer. And for many people, they'll just say, screw this, I'm just going to use a public AI. But can we share private data with a public AI without kind of losing ownership of that data? Because once it's out there, like DNA, it's out there, that's it. It's never coming back, right? Um, so zero knowledge is one great example of doing that. FHE and some other stuff do partial of that. So there are a couple of technologies that, again, enable you to get some of the utility out of the information without actually kind of sharing the information itself. And I think those technologies will be combined. You were asking also, what's kind of next? Where is this all going? I'm reflecting back on how this decentralization actually started, right? We started with the first generation with Bitcoin. That was mostly transfer of value. Then we kind of evolved to the second generation with Ethereum, where we said it's not just value, we want programmability, we want smart contracts to do a whole range of things. But then we saw the shortcomings of Ethereum and said, okay, it lacks scale. It doesn't necessarily have the governance. So the third generation with Polkadot, Cardano, Solana, and others came in and said, like, do that. I think we're on the cusp of the fourth generation. And the fourth generation needs to tackle the things that generation one, two, and three haven't yet addressed that are needed for the businesses of today. If you ask me, there are three things the fourth generation really needs to tackle. Number one is privacy, and we've covered that extensively just now. Both for data and metadata, everything needs to be protected so the user or the application can have the discretion of what is being shared and with who. It's not just everything is public. That modality is not good. We Some parts of life are private, some parts are public. You want to have some kind of degree of discretion. The second thing that I think blockchains have not addressed is cost. If I'm building an application on Solana, I'm just using Solana as an example, but that's true for any other blockchain. I need to know how much I need to pay to run that application. And if that payment is based on the price of a token that fluctuates, I'm having a struggle on projecting what would my costs be and how can I make a business plan and sell it to investors and they say, okay, well, what's going to be your cost across the next 5 years? Show us a business plan of revenue costs. If I cannot articulate that, they'll say, come back when you have a number, right? It's not good enough. I'm not going to get the investment. So right now, blockchains and all the technologies of even the third generation, people are playing with them, but they're not getting kind of crossing the chasm to mass adoption because they're struggling with that kind of final mile. And then the third thing that I really want to see, and that's more maybe a hopeful thing for me on the fourth generation, would be interoperability. The economics of blockchains, and I'm talking about plural, right, is one where you incentivize participants and people who are helping you operate the chain with a token. And so you create a token for every blockchain, and that token incentivizes a closed ecosystem which is why the folks in Ethereum are fighting the folks in Polkadot, fighting the folks in Cardano, everybody's trying to pull people into their ecosystem because it feels like the trade-off is if you're not with me, your money and other resources are elsewhere. There's very little economic incentive for people to come together for the benefit of the customer. So you have both lack of interoperability in kind of the fear by builders of, am I making the wrong choice? Right? You remember the saying, nobody got fired for buying IBM, right? If I'm if I'm building on Ethereum and Ethereum is not going to be the future success, I've made the wrong choice. If I choose Solana, I'm locked into that ecosystem. That is the wrong model. We gotta break this Web3 islands and create bridges. So if I'm as a builder, I want to build the next mega successful app for whatever app, I can use a mix of technologies and I'm not locked in. We gotta create ways of working together. I think the fourth generation, that is the focus that we need to drive.
I'd agree with you.
Thank you.
And my follow up there is, say we solve this interoperability problem. Does that mean that maximalization goes away?
Hopefully, yes, because everybody kind of all the boats float, right? So let me tell you a little bit of what we did and show you how that actually answers what you just described. I'll start with, we were really trying to solve two key issues. How do I deliver privacy for data and metadata? And how do we enable price predictability? We saw those as the two major blockers. And I wanted interoperability as well, but I realized that, if I could get there, that would be an awesome success. But I first need to get the table stakes out the door. And we were looking at Zcash and we spoke with the Zcash people and Monero people, the struggle that they had with the regulator. In it was a damn if you do it, a damn if you don't. You don't use a shielded token for the transactions. You expose the metadata. You use a shielded token. The regulator starts chasing you like they did for Monero. We realized at some point that we had to think outside the box, and we needed to not think in the sense of a token, but in the sense of how do we solve an ecosystem. And we came up with a different design that actually, instead of having a token, has a token and a resource, like two digital assets. And I'll explain why that solves it and why I think this model is probably going to be copied by many blockchains into the future. You want to protect kind of the metadata. So you need the gas asset to be shielded. The problem is, as I said, if you use that as a transfer of value, you create the kind of the rails for money laundering. So what we created is a dual component system. We have a token, a regular token called Night, after the blockchain Midnight, which is an unshielded token that you can trade on exchanges, exchange between wallets, a normal token like everybody's familiar with. But that is not the token you pay for transactions with. It's the security token, it's the utility token, but you don't pay with that. What happens is by holding Night, just holding it, it generates a secondary resource called Dust that is a shielded resource that you pay transactions with. Now, why does that solve our problem that we just described? Is because I now have two assets, I can put a different set of rules on Dust, like it automatically decays, so it's not a store of value. It cannot be transferred between people, so it mitigates all the money laundering concern that regulators have, etc., etc. So I can give it a different set of rules and behavior while keeping my standard token as standard and plain use as you'd like. Using that modality, I can have the cake and eat it too. I can protect metadata, but still have a regular token that regulators are saying, yeah, that's fine. And your secondary asset cannot be used for all the bad things that we were afraid of. But that design did not just aim to solve privacy, it also solves the issue of pricing and cost predictability. Here's why. Because if I know I'm building an application, let's say now to do, I don't know, financial trading, or I'm building something with avionics to trade, I don't know, to track airplanes, whatever it is, I would know based on my customer set how many transactions I need to do in a given month based on my business plan. And therefore, I can figure out based on the set of the transaction how much dust, how much kind of gas would I need. And based on that, I can kind of extrapolate how much night I need to hold in order to generate that amount of dust, because there's kind of a correlation. Why is that helping me? Because unlike the case we gave before with Solana projecting the price, etc., even if the price of night fluctuates, it doesn't impact me at all because I'm holding the night. I'm not spending the night. I buy X amount of night for the generation of the dust and I hold it. And no matter what the price of night is, it still generates the amount of dust that I need for the transactions. So I know exactly how much I need to invest in order to build my application, and the fluctuation in the price of the token has no impact on me because I don't need to buy more tokens down the road to replenish like I did with Solana. However, of course, if comes the case where my business is successful and I get more customers, then maybe I need more capacity, then I need to buy more night in order to generate that capacity. But that is kind of a nature of any other business where you need to add resources. And further to that, and that ended up solving our interoperability, which was a nice kind of a cherry on the top, was then became the question of like, so can I really be specific about the amount of night that I need? What happens if I bought too little or I bought too much? What would happen to that excess capacity? Well, if you bought a lot of night and you're not using all the capacity it generates, there's a secondary market where you could give the dust that, or kind of generate the dust that you gave to somebody else that may be needing capacity but doesn't hold enough night. Let's say, Jamil, you need to execute some transactions. You don't hold any night. You say like, okay, I just need an ad hoc transaction. Give me some dust, I can process it. How would you pay me for that right? Well, you could pay me for that with Solana, with Ethereum, with Bitcoin. What that means is that people in other chains can execute transactions on midnight and pay for them with their own native tokens, creating the interoperability between ecosystems because now there is no more silo. You're not worried about having to go into another economy. You can pay for transactions with whatever token, even with US dollars, doesn't matter. And we are creating both privacy, cost predictability, and interoperability in one.
Yeah, I was going to say I would pay you in either Tether or USDC.
Sure,
but
of course.
but let's take your construct and tie it back to our earlier conversation, right? You could say you could use, yeah, privacy versus compliance, right? You could have one interoperable token, like say for example Night or Dust, either one, have that be for privacy and have Dust be for the other be for compliance, and that institutions could adopt that model and then be able to do both within the organization, right?
Yeah. I mean, today, I'm thinking of you. We mentioned Google before. Can you imagine Google on a Web3? I would have to pay, with every search that I do, I have to click and pay from my wallet for a token from a search. Obviously, that doesn't work. There is an economic model where somebody else is subsidizing your application, but that model is hard to implement in Web3. If we can create this kind of economy with two tokens, we can have somebody else subsidizing your transactions and you can pay either with the dollars. We, in fact, when I use most web APIs to do today, web services, right? I just go to a website, there's a web API, I pay with dollars, I get access to the API. I don't know happening behind the scenes. Some magic happens behind there. We are going to get to that because I can open a web API and let people pay with dollars and get Midnight blockchain or others that are going to use the same modality with dual tokens. Nobody cares that it's a Web3 behind the scene. They'll get the value of it, but how it's implemented, they don't care. They just want, give me the API. It says what it says on the brochure. Great, I'll pay it with USDC. I'll pay it with dollars, right? And I can deliver a Web2 experience or a Web3 kind of technology with a Web2 experience to the market.
I see it. I see it. We just got to get the programming done right, and that'll be done. It'll be
Yeah,
great.
and then we will see the mass market come over because now they'll know that this feels for them like something they're familiar with. It's not some new thing. They don't, sorry folks, they don't care that much about our tokens or our economy or all that stuff. They just want simple, stupid, and just get all the value. Let's help them get there, and all boats will float.
Nice. I love it. Awesome. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you very much um, for your time and learning, and thank you. And I have one last question before I forget. How can people find out more information about you, about Midnight, about everything you're up to, about Shielded Technologies? How can they do that?
So obviously, the Midnight Network, you can just go on the web, midnight.network. Shielded, the company building it is shielded.io. We have both, web, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Telegram, all the channels are there. And there is a very excited team working on it. We have, besides Shielded, the labs building, there's also an organization called the Midnight Foundation, like any other good blockchain that is evangelizing. And they're working and partnering with a lot of people. So there's a test net open that people are trying and building things. There are resources available, programs. We would love to work with people. It's very exciting, and we work very closely actually with a lot of the blockchains. I mentioned Solana and Polkadot and Bitcoin folks and Ethereum because it's time to bring this industry together. Very excited to see what happens next.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jamil. Take care.